In his letter to the Galatians, Paul contrasts the destructive works of the flesh with the life-giving fruit of the Spirit. These verses, familiar to many, remind us that true faith is not measured by rules or rituals, but by the qualities of life shaped by God's Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. In the early church, these words served as a guide for a Christian community in a divided and diverse world. Today, they continue to call us toward a way of living that reflects God's kingdom on earth. Let us now hear these words as written in the Message translation. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 24. But what happens when we live God's way? He brings gifts into our lives, much the same way that fruit appears in an orchard. Affection for others, exuberance in life, serenity. We develop a willingness to endure, a sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. Legalism is helpless in bringing this about. It only gets in the way. Among those who belong to Christ, everything connected with getting our own way and mindlessly responding to what everyone else calls necessities is eliminated for good. It is crucified. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Rob Sargent. So this morning, while Pastor Patty is on sabbatical, we're continuing in our Stones of Faith program. I'd like to share my personal story, my journey of faith through my life. So each of us each week is sort of telling our tale, and doing so in various methods. For me, we're going with classic spoken word storytelling. So, I welcome you to my front porch, well, as it were, and I invite you to sit back and get comfortable and hopefully enjoy my tale with some inspiration taken from Galatians 5:22 to 23. So to give you a little background, I was born in a small town in Maine. I was born a poor child. Oh, wait, that's a different story. It was Buxton, Maine. It's about 20 miles west of Portland. It was a town that was going from being a farming community to, when I was growing up, they called it a bedroom community because everybody worked somewhere else. Now, it's just not a suburb of Portland. But I remember when they put in that first stoplight in Buxton. My great-grandmother, she lived next door to us. My grandparents lived next door to her. And just down the road was my great-uncle Ken and my great-aunt Hazel. Most of my mother's brothers and sisters, they lived right nearby, too. My great-grandmother was really the major religious inspiration for all of us. She really was the coolest. She really was. She read to me all the time, particularly the Little House on the Prairie books, as well as other stories. Graham liked to read the Bible. I don't know if anyone could even really count the number of times she read the Bible from cover to cover. She'd get to the end and she'd start over again. Graham lived her faith. No one went hungry in her presence. Everyone was accepted, loved, and shown both patience and grace. I mean, that doesn't mean she'd get a little cross with you sometimes, but most of the time she was just the best soul you could meet. When I was born, my mother made sure I was dedicated at church. She wanted to make sure that I'd be welcomed in church. Now, if I had sound effects, this is where that record scratch sound would play. You know the one I'm talking about? I guess I need to share a little bit more about the church we went to. West Buxton Baptist Church was a hellfire and brimstone preaching church. It was old school Baptist. Sunday mornings would find me getting dressed up in, I guess, my finery, and walking up to Great Graham's house and riding to church with Aunt Hazel. I distinctly remember sitting through Sunday services with Graham, feeding me those pink Canadian mints that she kept in her purse, just to keep me busy. Probably keep me quiet, too. I don't remember the services much, but those pink mints, those were great. Now, this was only when I didn't go to Sunday school. I remember doing crafts and coloring pictures and doing puzzles and all that classic Sunday school stuff. I also remember being assigned Bible verses to memorize. That's right, memorize. Those were not my favorite things to do. Not even close. But I tried. I can't say I was encouraged to learn any meaning from the verses, at least as I recall, and I don't remember a lot of discussion. There could have been, I guess. It just didn't sink into me. I recall messages like, "Don't disappoint God. Learn the verse." I remember being assigned to learn the Lord's Prayer. That one was okay. Greg Graham wanted to make sure I understood it and what we were asking and what we were pledging when we said it. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I had some great experiences at church. I was just a small child. I couldn't even tell you how old I was, but we had a husband and wife team of missionaries that the church had helped to support on their mission to Kenya. I remember they showed pictures and talked about building health clinics and schools and digging wells. They were just really so cool to my young mind. They had traveled. I mean, I hadn't really been outside of Maine that much, maybe over here to New Hampshire. At that point, maybe as far as Rhode Island. I couldn't tell you exactly. They went to Africa. They were helping people. It was just so cool. And the years went on, and I kept going to Sunday school and vacation Bible school. That was kind of fun, actually. That was a little bit like summer camp with some church thrown in, and, you know. I had friends my age there at church. So here's where I need to tell you. I was one of those kids that was labeled as gifted and talented. So I was allegedly smart, as we might say. And this condition led to some issues for me because I like to ask questions. Well, maybe not liked, I had the need to. I needed explanations, I needed answers. But I was just a little kid, you know. And well, I asked those questions. Unfortunately, I also asked them in church. Well, Sunday school anyway, and when you don't get an answer, you know, you get things like, "You don't need to know that right now. Why are you asking?" That's not an appropriate question to ask. Well, I thought there weren't any answers, or even worse, I was led to believe I should just blindly follow. That's how I felt, anyway. Now, I'm Irish, and Scottish, and English, and Native American by heritage, so I might be a little stubborn sometimes. I can't say I remember exactly what was the defining moment of my split with the Baptist church, but it was somewhere around the time of my questioning everything. Funny thing is, my great-grandmother wasn't upset. I kind of wandered around for a number of years, I guess you'd say, without faith, maybe, or at least not following a faith. I didn't not believe in God, but I wasn't going to church. I was, though, still inspired by what I had learned about the teachings of Jesus. Now, like I said, Great-Gram was one of those people who really lived her faith. I think she may have taught all of us who grew up around her that lesson. My grandfather, Great-Gram's son, was not a man who went to church. He couldn't quote scripture. He enjoyed his whiskey and was known to tell a bawdy story or two, even to a young, impressionable mind like mine. Grandpa, as I would come to learn, was also a deeply spiritual man. Leading up to one Sunday, I was grousing to my grandmother, I called her Ma, about having to go to church and how I just didn't like it anymore. Ma told me it was good for me to go and learn about Jesus. I think I might have, in a defiant moment, maybe even in a petulant way, said something about not learning anything more than memorizing verses or something along those lines. What I do know I did was to point to my grandfather and declare, well, he doesn't have to go, so why should I? Yeah. I don't remember how that conversation ended exactly, but I know I didn't feel too right about what I had said. A few days later, I was at my grandparents' house, as was my usual way. My grandmother liked to say that I could smell the cookies baking from a mile away. Maybe it was just that she made cookies all the time. I don't know. But I got there, and my grandfather said in a most serious manner that we needed to have a talk. My heart sunk. I knew I was in trouble, and I was going to get a lecture of some sort, probably punished. Grandpa just said, well, come on now. And we walked out to the garden. Okay, now here's where I need to tell you that calling what my grandfather had a garden would be sort of like calling a 4-lane highway just a little road. You didn't measure this garden in square feet. You measured it in acres. All tended by hand, each and every day. We stood there looking out at the fields of vegetables for just a few minutes in silence. Grandpa's words, though I don't remember them precisely, were something like this. You see this garden here? See the land and the sky and all of it? This here is my church. When I come out here, I know that the Lord is talking to me. He guides my hands and makes all of this possible. We eat pretty good. I thank Him every time I set foot out here. Maybe it's my way of praying and my way of having church. Didn't really say too much. We picked up some hoes and we started to weed the rows of growing vegetables, a job I usually didn't like. This time, though, this time was different. I never said another word about Grandpa not going to church. I do remember being a little older and seeing him out there in the hot sun tending to those plants and feeling like I was watching the Pope himself give a sermon. These days, when I look back on that, I can't do so without getting a little choked up. Good memories, a lasting lesson. So now, maybe a little bit more about that garden and all those vegetables. There was a lot of produce. I mean, a lot. Everyone in the family got some. We ate those crops fresh. We ate them canned. I may have eaten a lot of peas trying to pick them out of the garden. They were always sweet, always crunchy. Every bit, always delicious. Well, maybe not the beets or the tomatoes, but, that's probably a little bit more of a personal preference, but that's just more for you folks, that's all. Ma and Grandpa, for as long as I can remember, they also ran a little farm stand, selling the extra produce that they had at very reasonable prices. Lots of people would stop and talk and get whatever crop was ready and for sale at the time. But looking back, there was more to that. See, my grandfather was what I would say now, anyway, was a real disciple of Christ. He didn't preach. Far from it. He lived it. Grandpa knew a lot of people in town. He knew when they were doing well in life, and he knew when a family might be on hard times. More than once, Grandpa, Ma, and I would put some bags in the truck and we'd go for a drive. We'd stop at a house, and my grandfather would take a bag or two up to the door while Ma and I sat there in the truck. Sometimes he knocked on the door. Sometimes he just left the bags. The process, it doesn't really matter to me now. But what I was seeing in real life, right there in front of me, was a man showing love, kindness, and grace to his neighbors. Later on, I'd hear stories about Grandpa as a young man driving into Portland and making trades for goods that might have been expensive to buy during the Depression. No one in the family and no one around Grandpa would ever go hungry. He loved his neighbors as if they were himself. I wish I could have appreciated those teachings when I was younger and when Grandpa was still alive. Okay, well, I guess back to me, I suppose. My senior year of high school, I was an exchange student to the Republic of Turkey. Mom may have played a role in that, pushing me towards traveling and doing things that she never was able to do, but that again is another story. Some friends from school, the school I was going to there in Turkey, asked me if I wanted to go to the mosque with them one Friday. I was kind of intrigued, and I wanted to go, and I wanted to learn more. That first service I attended, I sat in the back with a few young boys. I was a visitor, not a follower of Islam, so this is where I was to sit, as was the custom. I didn't understand a lot of the service, as my Turkish was still, well, it wasn't so good. After the service, the imam asked my friends if he and I could talk. Through his broken English and my Sesame Street level Turkish, and with a little translation help, the imam asked why I came. I was honest and told him I was curious, and he smiled and told me he was curious too, and asked if I was a Christian and attended church. I told him I wasn't sure of my faith, but had been brought up in a Christian church. He told me how Islam reveres Jesus as a prophet, one of the most important prophets in Islam. I learned some more about Islam from him. He made sure I was invited back and said I should sit with my friends instead of the children. That was kind of nice. He tasked my friends with making sure I learned to pray in the Islamic tradition, which I hope I don't sound too blasphemous when I say is a little bit like aerobics. I don't remember how many services we went to. It wasn't a lot, but it was a real meaningful time for me. Over the years, I read several spiritual and religious texts, the Quran, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, and some others. I was floating around, not having a specific belief, but carrying with me those times I was taught about God's love and service to others. I had dark times of despair. And I've shared some of those here before about cursing God and asking why he had given me the challenges that he had. But again, that's another story for another time, though. So back to our story here. My mother did a lot of research into the family genealogy, and we discovered that stories my father's grandmother told had some truth to them. We were of Native American ancestry, and not so far removed from it. This led us to some local meetings and gatherings and meeting some people. And along the way, we found our Passamaquoddy heritage. And we made a trip up to the Passamaquoddy Reservation near Eastport. This is where Uncle Dave comes in. Now, Dave wasn't really an uncle by any kind of direct relation, but he and my father were friends from the first handshake. Dave was a traditional leader. People came to him to get for some guidance from time to time. Uncle Dave always had a story. He wove traditional tales in with some colorful stories of his life and growing up on and around Sapayak, homeland of the Passamaquoddy people, where the St. John River meets the ocean at Quoddy Bay. And it truly is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and I've been to some beautiful places. Uncle Dave told me to listen and pay attention to what my son was saying, because he had a special way of seeing the world that was a gift from the Creator. And it was my place to make sure my son's way of seeing the world was fostered and protected and shared with other people. Well, with inspiration and teaching drawn from several people in the Native community, I began following some more of the traditional ways. I burned sage to ward off bad spirits. I learned how our ancestors continued to guide us even after they had crossed over to the next world. I prayed to our Creator above, our Mother Earth, each of the cardinal directions, and those who came before us. I prayed with the pipe, and I participated in the sweat lodge. One of the most important things impressed upon me was living in service to others. We should give to those who don't have. We should help others in a time of need. We should all be as one people and keep our Mother Earth protected and honor our Creator of all things. Sound familiar? I sang songs, traditional and modern, with drums. The drum is the heartbeat of the people, and sharing that special music with the world was deeply meaningful. Looking back, these were all things that Great Graham wanted me to know. You see, Great Graham was Native herself. Her family took the name York and lived in the predominantly white community around them. They went to church. I'm guessing this is where Graham learned the teachings of Christ and followed his path. I also now know she held to some of those more traditional beliefs too. One spring, Great Graham took me out to her little garden. She showed me how to dig a little hole with a stick, and in the hole, she put some fish guts. Yeah, I know, kind of gross, right? Over that, we put a little dirt and then 4 seeds. She was very specific about putting in 4 seeds, which we then covered over and we watered. Graham told me how the fish would provide nutrition for the seeds, and how putting 4 seeds in the ground would ensure that the plants would grow. We planted corn and squash and beans. Graham said those were important crops to have. Again, later in life, I would learn that in many Native traditions, corn, squash, and beans were called the 3 sisters and had been grown together forever to feed the people and were sacred for that reason. Well, back in 2008, we moved from Maine to New Hampshire. I like to tell people it was because I just couldn't abide by the Maine winters anymore and had to move south. Really, it was because there were better jobs here, and I landed in Newmarket. My son joined Cub Scouts and followed my path into scouting, and I was volunteered, maybe voluntold, to be a leader. And not a big stretch for me. Through scouting, I met Pastor Patty and came here to Newmarket Church for Scout Sunday. While not what I considered to be a religious person, I wanted to promote the 12th point of the Scout law. A scout is reverent in our troop. Patty helped. The Scouts helped the food pantry, and they still do. Through Scouting for Food, we participated in the community. We shared the peace light from the Grotto of the Holy Sepulchre with the people of Newmarket at Christmas time. I had a lot of conversations with Pastor Patty about ways we in Scouts could help the community. One day, she just flat out invited me to come here to a service. It was kind of a big step for me walking in those doors. I'd left the church behind a long time ago and really didn't feel much connection. But I think we all know that Patty has a special way about her. So I came to church one Sunday, and what I found here at NCC was something I really hadn't found before. This is a church full of love and welcoming. I never once felt judgment. I wasn't told to just believe, but was shown love and compassion. I relearned about Jesus. I accepted all of his teachings and felt the love of a community steeped in the love of Christ. I don't just mean for Christ. I mean what it takes to walk in the path of Christ, in his teachings. Love others, serve others, welcome the stranger, help those in need, feed the hungry, care for the sick. Above all else, I learned that it's okay to be wherever one is on their journey of faith. We're all still learning. We're all still growing. I decided it was time for me to get baptized. And I remember that day well. I know a few of you folks were here that day too. I could feel my great-grandmother there with me that day. Her warmth all around me. Today I continue to serve and love and help wherever and however I can. I have my days where I wonder if I'm worthy of the love of God and the love of others. But I've come to know that Jesus is okay with that. He brought me here. He helped me revive my soul. In a way, he's brought my life of faith full circle. The light, love, and teachings of service from Jesus hold a dear place in my life. It's pretty cool, really. As I like to say in my own way, me and Jesus, we're tight. Well, that's my story. You know, I get a lot more anecdotes and little tales I can tell, but some of it's funny, some of it's sad, and a lot of it's just the mundanity of life. But with that, I give you my stone of faith, representing love and service. Thank you for listening.